We now return to another episode of the Tacho Show. I am, of course, your boy Tacho, your host for this evening. And we're going to be taking a look at this interesting topic of discussion that I came across on the subreddit. So this topic is by Kingsley91. So he says, this might be a controversial take, but we need more characters like Emblem Sigurd in the game because Powercreep a few years ago was boring AF. I'm a day one player, and I can say with confidence, for me personally, I like this new era of FE where we get new busted toys to play with. For me, the most boring era of FE was the era I'm going to dub the slight Powercreep era. This was the time period where we got a brand new God Sword every single month. And the only difference is maybe one has this encounter built into their weapon, the other might have like +1 special cooldown. It's right after the era where they just kept pushing out bulkier and bulkier armors that made good save units. This was the most boring era of FE for me personally. None of the units were unique. It literally only boiled down to who bought the newest God Sword and who bought the next bulkier armor. Now we have a million different units that can do unique things. Felix can't act 3 times alone. Attune Micaiah and get rid of your penalties. Ike is extremely bulky, tank, etc., etc. Like, that's interesting to me. That's cool to me that we have a boatload of units that do crazy things that we aren't used to seeing. I would much prefer they keep doing this with units doing crazy new things than us go back to the era where the crazy new thing was just a unit getting +5 to all stats instead of +4. I don't know. I personally think people complain too much about power creep because honestly, without it, I feel like the game would be extremely boring. Okay, so this is Kingsley91's take, right? I'm sure a lot of jimmies have been rustled by me just reading this, but I'm going to go ahead and chime in. I'm going to give my personal opinion on this and the whole power creep debacle as well, and then we're going to move on and we're going to read some comments by other people. So what do I personally think about power creep? I think power creep is just a necessity in these gacha games. They always do it. If you've played any gacha game, there's always going to be power creep, and why is that? Because they have to somehow find a way to sell new units to people. That's how the game makes money. That's how the game stays alive. So every gacha game, every single time they release a unit, they are going to try in some way or form to make that unit desirable to the player base so that they're going to either spend money or summon and spend their currency to try and get that unit. So I think power creep is fine. Like, it has to happen. And I'm not saying I would like the game to be stagnant either. I do think power creep should happen, regardless of the game making money or not, just to keep the meta fresh and exciting and new and different. Of course, there are boundaries. I don't want them to go too crazy with power creep, but I will say this. Right now, I'm actually very satisfied with where the game is. Like, I think the meta at the moment is one of the most varied that we've ever seen because, like this guy here says, Kingsley91, there's a lot of units that are doing very different and very unique things that there aren't really any other units that can match. So why don't we go ahead and we're going to head over to my channel. I did a top 10 units in the game video not too long ago, which I want to just quickly show which units I had in my top 10 over here, and we can just discuss from there. So these are my top 10. We have Brave Felix, we have the Duo Fiorm, we've got Brave Robin, we have Peko Mama, we've got Attune Micaiah, we have the Duo Baby Robin, we've got the Brave Bernadetta, and then we have Dear Dude. So I say top 10, but like really top 8 and then 2 that I decided on over the rest of the possible options. So let's for now just focus on these top 8 because I don't think there's any arguing against any of these 8 being a top 10 unit. Like these 2, maybe you could find some flaws here and there, but even then, like I think Murr is really good. Gatry, of course, is very good. So Felix has like the utmost action economy we've ever seen. He can end his turn and just get a free action. That's so good in basically every mode. Like in Aether raids, it allows him to test traps without wasting his action, or just break a structure and then get an extra action, or just extend his reach. He can move up like 1 or 2 spaces, extend his reach so that he's able to target one of the nearest enemies, and then he can just use his second action to go in and attack. Then not only that, he gets an extra action after he attacks. So, I mean, this guy has been the premier Gale Force unit for Aether raids since his introduction into the game, and he's also very varied in how you build him. Like, there's so many different ways you can play him. You can use AoE Felix, you can use Gust Felix and just run his base kit, which is already pretty good. You can use like double fury on him to chip his HP really low, so you can then start in Wings of Mercy chaining with your other units. So there's a lot of ways to play him, even though he is basically on every single team right now. People are running him in different ways. It's not like they're just doing the same exact thing every single time. So I think that's really cool. FEHorm, you can run her as a far save. That's probably what most people are doing, but I don't think people realize how effective she can be as a near saver as well. She can actually do it, even though her kit has nothing to do with near saving. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that her duo skill is really busted, setting up ice tiles for 2 turns. And then also on top of that, she is able to just have Shield Fighter, which right now is... Shield Fighter is the equivalent of like save skills on release and like Hardy Fighter on release, where it's such a meta-defining skill for bait units that they pretty much have to have it to even be able to be viable, at least if you're an armor type. So FEHorm's got a lot of stuff in her bag. She's really good. And then we have Brave Robin, who's setting up the ice every single turn, as opposed to FEHorm doing it for once, but then it's 2 turns. Hers is also locked to a duo skill. Robin can set it up on the enemy phase as well, so that's really good for Aether Raid's defense teams and so on and so forth. Then she's a stat buffer, giving attack and speed up 6 and cancel 1 to allies. Then she's a stat debuffer for the foes with Hush Spectrum and Panic. So just the deepness, the depth of this unit's bag is crazy. Like, these units, all of them, are doing so many things. Haythrun's got the Nectar support. If that wasn't good enough, she's also doing a debuff to the enemies in 3 columns and 3 rows. She does, like, Discord, and I think she does Deep Wounds and also Nullify Non-Special Miracle, which is crazy. And then she also does attack and defense -7. So just nutty amounts of debuffing and support. Then she's also insanely tanky as a wall unit herself with Lagoo's Friend and, like, Pavis and Aegis and stuff. So really crazy unit there, doing a lot of things. Micaiah does a million things. All these units pretty much just do a million things, which is why I have them all here, and which is why I also gave the nod to Myrrh down here, because she's able to do Warp Bubble, which only one other unit is able to do, Gatekeeper. So she does Warp Bubble, and then she also gives it to an ally, and then she's also doubling as a far save. So to me, that's doing a little bit more than what Gatekeeper does, and that's why I have her above him. Even though Gatekeeper gets his Warp Bubble immediately, which can be more relevant for things like Aether Raid's defense, but Myrrh overall is just going to be better once her Warp Bubble kicks in. So there you guys go. Like, right now, the units, the assortment of units that we have floating at the top of the meta are just all-rounders. It's like DC Comics, right? Like, all of the DC characters are so busted and overpowered because they just do a little bit of everything, as opposed to the Marvel universe being full of a bunch of specialists that maybe they're only good at one thing, but then they're not good at, like, everything else. Things like that. That's how I would like to view these units as. So there we go. My take on Powercreep is that the meta is really good and really varied right now, even though you're only seeing really a handful of units. They are still doing so many different and unique things that it makes the game feel fresh regardless. Okay, now let's also... I want to show this, too. So let's head down here, because people always... It seems like YouTubers get it the worst when it comes to talking about Powercreep, because everyone's like, oh, if you guys on YouTube don't say the unit is broken or the banner is busted or anything like that, like there's no Powercreep, you always tell us not to summon, right? But then whenever the unit's busted, you're like, oh, everybody should summon, and then you guys chastise Powercreep like it's something horrible and something that should never happen. Nah, let me explain this real quick. Hold on. I think I scrolled down too far. I just want to bring up the Christmas banner here. Okay, where is the Christmas banner? God, my thumbnails are so colorful. Okay, here we go. So, this is the Christmas banner trailer that I did. Obviously, I'm being very facetious here. RIP Fire Emblem Heroes with a, like, epitaph for their death right there. Holiday lessons. So the Christmas banner was really the banner that I felt started this insane power creep that we're in right now. And this video got 14K views for a trailer breakdown video. That is unheard of. I ain't getting views like that for a trailer breakdown since, like, Book 4. Or, like, even Book 1, Book 2. I remember the very first Fallen Heroes banner. I got a lot of views on that video, but... This, like, in this day and age, 7 years into FE, this doesn't happen anymore. To get 14K views for a trailer, it just goes to show that power creep, even though people will always bitch and whine, like, oh, I hate power creep so much. it still brings in the views. It still attracts attention, right? Like, that's what people want. And I also feel like there's a lot of people that don't play Fire Emblem Heroes that are just here to watch the train wreck. Like, they just want to see the game spiral out of control. I get that comment a lot on a lot of my videos. They're like, I stopped playing this game a long time ago, but I still watch your videos because I want to see how the game ends, like how the game dies on its own, like just having so much power creep that the game kills itself. So, like, that's the sort of thing. That's the sort of attention that this game is attracting right now. So, when YouTubers talk about power creep and they have the thumbnail and it's like, let's take Emblem Sigurd, for example. He's the most recent example. I'm talking him up like he's a must summon, he's insane, he's ridiculous. Other YouTubers are like, he's the god of movement. It's like, we need safety fence 2 and all this stuff. Like, we're breaking out the floodgates. We're making it sound like this guy is going to shatter the game in half. And that's just fun. Like, we're doing it all in good fun. It's hyperbole to say it like that, but hyperbole is fun, right? Like, we're able to react to the unit in a way that, I mean, it's a natural reaction because, like, we play the game and we know, like, what's going to work and what's not going to work. So we can look at Sigurd right out the gates and be like, oh, he's busted. He is going to dominate. So that's a good reaction. We're talking about, like, power creep. We're saying the unit's a must summon. That's good. That's a good thing. We're not saying it to be negative or anything like that. So keep all of that stuff in mind. That is pretty much my take on power creep. Now let's go ahead and see what other people have to say about this. So JB1990 says, controversial might be putting it lightly. It's interesting to me that you highlight the slight power creep era as being a negative due to seeing incremental increases to power creep on a constant basis. Yet the current issue with power creep accelerating seemingly exponentially is not an issue. I don't think folks would be quite as concerned if we got units like Emblem Sigurd once or twice a year. I mean, that's how gachas work. But we're getting frankly insane leaps in power creep on almost a monthly basis. Well, this is true, what he's saying here. Like, every single banner, it feels like, has a unit on Emblem Sigurd's level. Alright, like, just personally, I have units I got this year that are already basically dead weight. I don't think it's great when you basically have to get the latest units every single month to have a chance at being competitive. Well, there's also a flip side to that coin. So, hold on, let me show you guys. So, the latest banner, the Aided Heroes, Aided Regan, and Attuned Chimera banner. Now, that banner had great units on it, right? Like, Fogato's a great unit. He specializes in getting rid of the duo Fearorm. Like, he has a really good matchup against her. Attuned Chimera, of course, is an attuned hero, so you can use her as a fodder bank. She's already coming with great fodder, like Lagu's Friend and so on. Times Pulse Echo as well. And she's basically just a Lance version of Emblem Ike, for the most part. Like, that's the easiest way I could describe her. And we already know Emblem Ike's a really good hero, right? Like, he's great. So, having a Lance version of that, who has color advantage against, right now, the best melee unit in the game, Felix, is going to be very good. And then we have, of course, Aided Regan, who's an awesome unit. She is one of the better nukes. They showed her in the trailer just tearing Peko Mama in half, which is a really good showcase for damage potential. So all of the units on this banner were very good. But again, they're very specialized. Like, remember what I was talking about when I talked about top 10. The units in my top 8, well, quote-unquote top 10 right now, they're doing like a million things that are very unique that no one else is really doing. Whereas the units on this banner were all doing kind of the same thing that we've already seen. Like, Emblem, or Attuned Chimera is basically just Emblem Ike. Fogato is pretty much specialized to just kill the duo Fearorm. And then Aided Regan is pretty much specialized as just a big damage nuking unit. So why would I want to run units like that when I could just run units like these in my top 10 that are doing all of that and then a bag of chips, right? They do your homework, they do your taxes, they walk the dog, they mow the lawn, etc., etc. I would rather use units that can do a million billion things. And we don't get that often. Like, that's the type of thing we don't get often. This type of thing we get more frequently. So I just would like to add that to what JB1990 is saying here. Okay, like, just personally, I have units I got this year that are basically dead weight. Yeah, I think we read the whole thing already. To put it briefly, power creep isn't the issue. It's the speed at which power creep is occurring that's the problem. Now, there's also a flip side to that, too. Which is, when everything is broken, nothing is. It's the old The Incredibles meme, where when everyone's super, no one is. Which is kind of where we are right now in the game. Like, there's just so many busted bananas units that it kind of balances itself in a way where, okay, if everyone's using Brave Felix, everyone's using Brave Robin, like Duo Fiorm, etc., one person still has to come out on top, right? One person is still going to have to be the winner at the end of the day if we're all using the same stuff. It just comes down to how you're playing those units. Like I have over here with saying creativity at an all-time high, and then I'm showing off like all sorts of different things people have been doing with Felix in the thumbnail. Like I've seen warping shenanigans with him to extend his reach. Pathfinder is what I've been doing. You can use Shadow Slide or Shadow Shift, whatever that's called, to repo him for free. You can use Duo Sigurd's Duo skill to repo him for free. So there's a lot of combos with Felix right now that are just making him great. A lot of different build variety as well, as I mentioned earlier. So yeah, just because everyone's using the same exact units doesn't mean they're using them in the same way. And it promotes a lot of like healthy thought in the game, like thinking about the game. Like, how do you want to approach? How do you want to run these units? How do you want to play them? How would you like to approach? Now, I'm a big player for Aether Raids. Like, that's probably my main mode, more so than SD, because, like, I have to play Aether Raids every day. It's not like Summoner Duels where I have to play that every day. So I'm more, like, on the know on what's going on in Aether Raids, and I can say for a fact, like, this is probably the most fun Aether Raids has been for me since... Oh, man, when was the last time I had this much fun in Aether Raids? Huh. Probably since, like, Spring Breeze had 4 walls, to tell you the truth. Like, that's the last, like, memorable meta for me, at least. Because ever since then, it's been, like... There's always been, like, some kind of problem where, like, offense has been way too powerful for way too long that defense could not compete. Defense had a brief moment when Legendary Sigurd came out and they didn't have the safety fence yet. But then what did they do? They went ahead and made the safety fence. Then defense got that Jotunheim castle map with the 2 walls, and then they were like, oh no, this is too good. Let's break those walls. Let's make them breakable. Like every single time, defense has had something, like some kind of tool to operate well. They just like go back on it immediately and just make offense better again. So for the game, for Aether Raids at least, to be good, I feel like defense teams need to be better, because that promotes better offense, better strategy. How are you going to tackle these maps? And right now, I think that's what's going on. Like, I feel like defense has had enough tools at this point. We've got Haethrun, of course. We got Brave Felix. We've got also Brave Robin. Like, all of those units are such staples on defense teams, and they're doing something that's really helpful for the team that it pushes us really hard on offense to be able to break teams like that. So, yeah. Okay, I mean, a lot of this video has just been my own opinion. We haven't really touched up much on what other people are saying. All right, Julian Skies says, to be honest, I strongly agree with the OP, but I think people are putting a wrong focus on what is fun here. Those units are interesting, and they do interesting things. Power creep or not, they're fun units. Exactly. This is like one of the biggest points I have seen so far. So, it doesn't matter if the units are busted as hell. Like, Brave Felix, he is broken beyond belief. But he's also really fun to play with, right? Like, it's very good unit design with him. Alright, an example of similarly fun units with not as much power creep is Halloween Zane. He was also pretty fun, too. Now, he didn't really age too great, because, like, visible stats didn't really pan out to be, like, a good strategy. Like, why would you run Halloween Zane who reflects stats of other units when you could just use that unit who already has busted stats in the first place, right? But, no, he was very fun on release, Halloween Zane. Alright, there was also a long period of time where where there wasn't really anything interesting going on. Like, early on, Force Follow-Up was as interesting as it got. Heck, I remember when Base Lin's low health Brashpiration was the coolest thing ever, because it was, you know, interesting. Yeah, I mean, the meta has been very stale and stagnant in the past. Like, let's take Book 2, right? Every single unit was just an armored unit at the time. Like, they would have Wary Fighter, Bold Fighter, or Vengeful Fighter. Those were the 3 main skills. And they had to shoehorn armors only because that's what people would summon for. They scored the highest for arena mode, and that's what people were spending money on back then. So the focus of the game was primarily towards armored units for, like, Book 2 up until a certain point. Then when we started getting duo heroes, and they realized they could make, like, high-scoring units that weren't armor, Like Duo Lift, for example, he's one of the first examples. They were like, okay, let's just make all these busted offensive units score high now. And then that like shook up the meta quite a bit, especially for Arena, where now people are spending money to score high with units that are actually good, as opposed to just a bunch of armored units that sit in place and can't really do much. Then the next level of power creep was when they started doing God Swords, right? Like units that could do everything, like Omni Tanks, that sort of role, but God Sword like, where the unit has a lot of speed and a lot of attack, and maybe their defenses weren't the greatest, but they made up for it by having a lot of dodge-based DR. So they would start giving out like close call and things like that. And there was in fact a meta where we had like a God Sword every month, like the OP here is saying, like Kingsley. He said we had a meta where we went from like Ascended Fear to Summer Fiorm to like Lucia and so on and so forth. Then we ended up getting Felix. It was just a non-stop barrage of God Swords, and they were very similar. They didn't really do much different from each other. So right now the game is definitely broken away from that, where they have like this one archetype that's working, like armors in the past, God Swords in the past. Now we're just getting like a bunch of everything, which I think is good. Okay, we need more interesting mechanics. Big-ass weapon restrictions are, in fact, good because it means there's some fun complexity going on. The power creep itself is somewhat tangential to all of this. I don't know about that, like bigger weapon descriptions, because it is annoying to have to read the whole thing. And it's not good for new players to, like, watch a trailer and just see a paragraph of weapon descriptions. So what they could do about this, maybe just streamline the way the text is a little better. Like, just use bullet points. Make it look neat and tidy, as opposed to just being a big wall of text. And also get better at explaining what the weapons do, because right now they're not very good at that. Like, you could read a weapon and still not even know what it does. I don't think that's good game design. Like, they gotta really get their points across a lot better. All right, I'm guessing the pro power creep players don't play modes where you're forced to fight against these units. I do. I play AR, I play SD, I play every mode in the game. And I'm consistently, like, anywhere from, like, top 100 to top 500 in pretty much all of them. So, yeah, I would like to think I know what I'm talking about here, and I'm having a lot of fun right now. There's nothing fun about overpowered units that your once was considered tanky 2-month-old unit gets one shot by. Also, a few years ago, I could happily use my 2 to 3 year old unit perfectly. This is exactly, I mean, I don't want to call this guy out, but this is exactly the type of person that is anti-power creep. Because, like, their old units, their old favorites that they built up, they invested in, are no longer able to compete, which, I mean, that's just nature of gacha games. Like, your unit from 2 and 3 years ago, of course they're not going to be as powerful as they once were. The difference in Feh, though, is that we have skill inheritance that you can use to continuously buff your old units. So we just got, what, Momentum 4 from the new Sigurd, which is a ridiculous skill for your cavalry melee types. It can be given to, like, non-cavalry as well, like infantry and flyers too. So if your unit happens to be like that and they're a player phaser, they just got a really good new tool to add to the shed. So yeah, it's not like completely hopeless for these old units, but I do see where this guy is coming from. It was fun to invest in your favorite character and use them in every mode. There's no investing in Feh right now, honestly. Don't invest in anything. Just, like, summon one copy of the new hero and then maybe summon one copy of skill fodder and pretty much go from there. Like, that's it. Like, you can't really afford to be going for plus 10s anymore. Not in this game. Not, like, the amount of orbs they give us a month, I think, is like 300. And to get a plus 10, it takes, what, like, maybe about 1,000 to 1,500 orbs. Depends on the banner. But that is not worth it. To go that hard to summon one unit when you can just be doing sparks for about, like, 135 orbs a summon. And you're guaranteed to get a unit. You can get, like, 3 or 4 separate units with the amount of orbs it would take to get one single plus 10. And those 3 or 4 different units are going to actually be more beneficial to you in the long run than a single plus 10 is. So they've entered this, like, situation where plus 10ing units is no longer a viable strategy, and just like building up a wide variety is better. Like, just getting a single copy of all the new stuff is better. All right, now you have to pull for the newest toy each month or you'll get destroyed. The fairness to that, though, is that we do get at least enough monthly orbs to be able to summon 1 or 2 new units a month. So at least there's that. What's the point in saving up orbs for all year to get fodder for your favorite unit if said unit is going to be obsolete by the time you have the orbs? Well, this again brings up my point that I just made, is saving up orbs to get one single plus 10 is not a good idea anymore. Maybe that was like a long time ago when you could just rely on high scoring units like armors or the duo heroes and so on, but that's not really how the game works right now. Like you can't really just save up to go for a plus 10 and then afford to miss out on like emblem heroes that give you the ring and like duo heroes like FEHtuber that can just come out of the box and just be doing a million things. Okay, well, this guy is making an addendum here, level 7 Cannoneer. I'm guessing the pro Powercreep. Oh, did he just repost what he just said? I think he did. Oh, I do play modes where I'm forced to fight these units. Failing to notice a Felix in arena is kind of annoying, but whatever. Dealing with warping Felix in AR is a pain, but that's just a new form of the same old pain of cav lines that existed since the dawn of Fae. Sure, there's a new coat of paint, but it's the same bullshit as ever. But as I've said, it's not power creep that's fun per se. It's the existence of interesting effects. Okay, so what this guy said here, this also brings to mind another thing. Yeah, Felix is dominating in Aether raids right now. He's pretty much the primary unit on defense teams. So what does that also mean? He's the #1 target to deal with. So how do you deal with Felix? Run a good near saver, right? Like I showed off a couple in my top 10 units video. We have Gatry up there, who's a really great near save. Duo FEHtuber, believe it or not, can be a valuable near save. Just like you gotta adapt, man. You can't just say, oh, the game is kicking my ass, I'm done. Like power creep is bananas, I can't keep up. Just adapt. Like I mean, there are old units that can deal with Felix pretty effectively. I've seen Ascendity Dune do a good job against him. So yeah, even like Brave Hector with near save can do a decent job against Felix. It's not like it's hopeless. All right, Max FE says, IMO, it would be less annoying without PvP. PvP in gacha is questionable choice anyway. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I don't like PvP in gachas particularly, where it gives way too much of an advantage to paying players. I think, like, co-op would be the way to do it in gacha, because then you could at least help, like, the non-spending players, help them get a better chance of winning. But constantly having to summon the newest characters and fodders to be able to compete is annoying. That's not always necessarily true, though. Like, look at DTM, right? DTM is completely free-to-play. And he's got, like, over 2,000 free-to-play orbs right now, because he rarely summons. He just summons, unless they got to add, like, something completely game-defining for him to want to summon. So, it is possible to be free-to-play and also be successful. All right, this I agree with, too, because having a PvP system in gacha sounds like a recipe for disaster. I agree with that. I do play SD, but I only use my favorites. I'm in the mindset, personally, if I lose to someone who wails on the game, oh well. I still like playing it. I'm still going to have fun. Yeah, I mean, I agree with this too, right? Like, I play a lot of players that are just using theme teams in SD. I fought, like, a 3 houses theme team where he was just using 3 houses characters. And he definitely knew how to play, the person who I was up against. It's not like he was a nobody, like he didn't know how to play the game. He was pretty good. It's just that he was using his favorites, and I'm sure he's having a lot of fun by doing that. So, it's not like you have to have this hopeless mentality. Alright, the problem is you can introduce new mechanics without this level of power creep. Sigurd can be a highly mobile AoE unit, that's fine on paper, but he also gets both an AoE special and Gale Force. Yeah, that's a bit much. And true damage reduction, and he gives any other unit Kanto an additional move. His ring is really busted. He could have had half of those effects and still been worth pulling. I don't know about all that. Like, if he was just an AoE unit without the Gale Force, I don't think he would have been as valuable. But then again, he is an Emblem hero, so his ring, no matter what, would have been valuable. I don't know if Sigurd is the example I would have wanted to use for this, because it's hard to downplay the value of Emblem heroes when they come with that ring. Celica is probably a better example, right? Celica, I don't think Celica herself is actually that good of a unit. Yeah, she's got a lot of threat range, but that's not a big deal. Like, who cares? Her player phase is very mediocre. Her ring, on the other hand, is really game-defining. right? So I feel like Celica's ring, and I've felt this way since her release, her ring is way better than she is. I don't know if that's the case with Sigurd, right? Like, his ring is bananas, and then he himself is equally as bananas. All right, we're at the 30-minute mark. I think we can call it quits. We'll go up to Fire Emblem, and then we'll end there. All right, so Svedka9 says, it's all fun and games until you're trying to maintain tier 20.5 in Arena, but can't because your merged units can't keep up with the arms race. Yeah, that's a problem, too. Like, Arena mode, because the power creep has been going bananas. Now it's Sigurd ring, too. Sigurd's ring is going to be very annoying for Arena as well, just like Celica ring was. I can see the grimacing for Arena mode, because, like, literally, unless you have the bonus Legendary, it feels hopeless to even try to get to the next tier. But at least for me, like, my units are pretty well merged up from back in the day, so I do have a solid enough Arena core that I can maintain tier 20.5 at the very least, if not maintain the crown every week. So, not as big of an issue for me, but I can totally get it for other people. Like, if you're up against Felix every map and your team is ill-equipped to deal with him, or like Emblem Mike, for example, these are units that score high enough for Arena mode, but their counters are so few and far between that you're not likely to have counters for them in Arena mode. So, that's definitely a problem. Easily fixable, though. I think all they need to do is let us actually use the pair-up feature that the Legendary units have for Arena mode. So, let's say you've got a pair-up Legendary hero. While you're playing in Arena, they could just swap into somebody else who is better equipped to deal with all the crazy threats right now, and that's not going to hurt your score or hurt you in any way. So, very easy way for them to fix Arena right there. All right, I was looking for the 4 Emblems, then I realized this was actually serious. Okay. All right, Fire Emblem, you are going to wrap us up here. You're not wrong, but a big emphasis on that but. It's only because this game chooses to be so PvP heavy. Power creep, no matter how big or small, is not an issue on its own. It's when you got to be pitted against other players who, especially in a gacha, can pay to keep up with it consistently, while the peasants have to pray or get lucky or hoard to even stand a chance. If this game had more enjoyable PvE or co-op content to use those fun toys with, we'd be happier to see just how crazy a unit can get. Look at Seer's Snare. That mode takes pride in making your unit an overpowered menace, and no one complains about it. But as it stands now, the power creep is only controversial because we know the effects it'll have on these PvP modes that people are already finding frustrating to deal with at the moment. That's how I feel, at least, and what I hear from most players. Perfect example, Brave Felix. Awesome unit to play with, miserable to deal with when faced in ranked PvP modes. Again, though, I mean, that brings up my point. He's the most common unit, so that also means he's going to be the most common unit to counter. Right? Like, if you're seeing the same exact unit on every team, you should go out of your way to bring a way to beat him. Like, in this example, it would be just some good near-safe blue. There's a lot of near-safe blue units that could just tank him. Maybe they can't kill him. Like Gatry, for example. I don't think Gatry can actually finish him off. But for sure, Gatry can tank him. And we're talking about Gatry here. Like, he's been a 5-star for ages. Like, a lot of people probably have him. You could also pull him off focus. He's a 4-star special rate pull. So, I'm sure most people have Gatry. Or if they don't have him, there's other blue armored units they might have, like Ascended Dune or Brave Hector and so on. So, yeah, I think that's a good enough place to wrap it up. We talked quite a lot here about power creep and my thoughts on power creep. I don't know how many people are going to be in agreement on Camp Tacho on what I've had to say about this, but that's how I'm feeling. I have to be honest. I have to tell you guys the way I'm feeling. I can only speak from my own point of view. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think about all this. And this is your boy Tacho signing out. So take care, fellas, and I will catch y'all again on the flip side.